Welcome to Soul of Travel. I am so excited today to be sitting down with Yulia Denisyuk to talk about freelance travel photography and writing and the power of storytelling. And today feels like an extra special conversation. Yulia and I were just talking about the fact that we saw each other in real life last weekend, which feels like an anomaly to me still, to start connecting with people and getting to get out from behind Zoom and really come back to the world of travel. So it's so exciting to see you here. And I'm also just so grateful that we got to connect last weekend. So welcome to Soul of Travel.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's so special to meet somebody in person and then be able to connect like this as well. So I'm excited as well. And so glad I got to meet you in person and celebrate with you for your incredible win this weekend. Congratulations again.
Thank you. Yeah, for those of you listening, I had mentioned probably several months ago that Soul of Travel was nominated for a Bessie Award with the wonderful community for my work in elevating the voices of women in the travel industry. And so, as Yulia mentioned, I won, which I'm still kind of trying to soak that in and realize even what that means, but it really means a lot given that that was the mission of this podcast. So, and I'm so grateful you were there to celebrate. It just feels like this kind of full circle moment. Many of my other guests were there as well as their leaders in the travel industry. So it's just pretty exciting time to think about like all the possibilities. I'm trying not to plan too many things. Once I have something like that, I'm like, oh, what's the next thing? I feel like you are a kindred spirit in trying to figure out like, how else can I create connection and community, and what else can I do to serve? And so I'm trying to rein myself in. I already got told not to do anything else by several friends this weekend. As I was like leaning into the next thing, they're like, Christine, just stay still for a second.
And by the way, just a quick note on that. So there's this framework that I use for one of the programs I teach called Dragon Dreaming Framework. And I love it so much because it says that to any project, to anything that we want to do in life, there are 4 phases: dream, plan, do, and celebrate. And what I love about that framework is that the celebrate phase is just as long as the other 3. And where else in our lives do we devote so much time to celebrating? We don't, right? We just move on right away to the next thing. So I encourage you as well to just keep celebrating for now.
Oh, that's so helpful. I was just talking with a friend. I'm like, I feel like I don't even know how to do that part of business. Like anytime I hit a goal, I'm like, yes, next goal. I'm very, very bad at celebrating. And I don't know if that's the like not wanting to put attention on myself, or just like not really knowing how to sit in that stillness and always wanting to move on to the next thing. So I'm sure for our listeners that I'm probably not the only one. So that's already some super valuable wisdom that you're sharing. So thank you so much.
Of course.
So for those of you joining us, I have been so lucky to sit in on a few classes. This is how I met Yulia in the wonderful community. If you aren't already a part of it, I know that we both would definitely encourage you to seek that out. But what I really loved so much was this wisdom, and also this magical storytelling ability that you have, whether you're talking about travel or photography or just anything. You have a very captivating presence. And so that's what drew me in. And I'm so excited for those joining us to get to learn a little bit more about you. As we begin, Yulia, would you mind just sharing a little bit about who you are in the space of travel right now?
Sure, and thank you for that. That's so wonderful to hear. I am a travel photographer and writer, a journalist, and I am very fortunate to and grateful to work with different publications around the world that focus on travel, in telling stories about travel, about people and places around the world, and hopefully inspiring others to travel a little bit more deeper next time around and try to connect with people, because I believe that that's really the power of travel, is when we connect with people from various places around the world. I also run Travel Media Lab, which is a community for women who want to break into the travel media industry. We do a lot of support there. And I also bring groups to Jordan, which is like my second home now. I just returned from Jordan last week, actually. So I bring small groups there because it makes me so happy to share the love I have for that country with other people. So that's me in a nutshell. Everything I do is revolving around travel and storytelling. So I love that part of my life.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Again, like I feel like that love is really present and very something aligned with how I believe travel feels and how I believe travel looks. And I think that's what I really resonated. I was like, oh, that's someone who sees travel the way I see travel, like full of opportunity and connection and stories and like magic. And so, yeah, I can't wait to share that more as we go through this conversation. To get to understand a little bit more about you, when did you start traveling, or when did travel start to become a part of shaping who you are now?
Yeah, well, honestly, it's since the beginning, since as long as I remember. My first solo trip was happening when I was 5 years old. My mom put me on a plane, and the plane took me to Kazakhstan, which is where my grandma was, and the flight attendant was the one sort of keeping an eye on me. But because of our family geography, my grandma was in Kazakhstan, which is where I was born. But my mom and I were in Estonia, where we moved when I was 3. So ever since being 3 years old, we would every summer would travel back and forth from Estonia to Kazakhstan. And if you kind of know geography, it's a huge distance. And we covered it usually on a train. So I would, be looking at all these huge different landscapes, traveled most of Russia, most of Kazakhstan on a train. And it just, I don't know, there was something special about being on a train so early. And I absolutely love this idea of exposing kids to traveling and to different environments early on. I think it is just, it shapes people in ways that we probably don't even fully understand. So travel was always a part of my life. Then I moved to United States when I was 16, and I continued to travel all throughout sort of my formative years. And even when years later down the road, I ended up in corporate America, which anyone listening who's ever been in corporate America knows that traveling while working in corporate America is quite hard because the vacation policy is just abominable. 14 days a year is not enough for the kind of travel that I want to do. But I was managing to sort of, sorry, I'm taking my bracelets off because they keep clinking here. And the kind of travel I wanted to do 14 days a year just was never enough, but I always tried to manage to sneak it in. I remember going to Dubai, for example, on a weekend. So taking Friday off and taking Monday off and fitting a trip to Dubai in that time, like it was just insane, So travel was always part of my life as much as long as I can remember. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm just so grateful that now it has become an central part of my life, basically, in the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned kind of that wide-eyed looking out at the world as a young child. I feel like so many of the people that I've talked to have been lucky to have those experiences. And I really do think it shapes who you are and how you see the world. You just have such a greater sense of the scale of the world. And at the same time, like, I think it really gives you this humble sense of your place in the world. Like it really just shifts how you feel about everything. I mean, I think this is why travel is so important, but like you mentioned, for children to really become grounded in that sense of space and environment at such a young age. I don't know if I've mentioned to you, but I'm getting ready to start planning a year of traveling with my daughters, and we're going to be
amazing.
leaving in a year from June. So actually today they're watching some cartoon about Scotland right now. So they're obsessed with Scotland. And so we were listening to like Scottish dialects, and they were practicing like language, but it's already really fun to just see them get curious about the world, and then thinking about, what they'll know about the world after that period of time. I'm so grateful to be able to even consider having an experience like that with them. But I especially being the person I am in the space of travel, I'm really excited to witness like their evolution. And I think maybe be more aware of that as it's happening than maybe some people would be, because I'm always kind of focusing on that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then you did mention that you ended up in corporate America, working a lot and really dreaming about travel. I feel like that's definitely something we can relate to. I mean, even for me right now, I feel like I'm working, hoping to get to the travel. There's something about shaping your life so that it can involve more of what you really love out of life. What was the catalyst for you to say, okay, I'm tired of trying to do a quick trip to Dubai on the weekend, which really seems really crazy, actually. Just that flight feels like a weekend's worth of traveling. But what made you feel like now is the time, and what really gave you the permission, I guess, to take that step?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question, because the reality is that it's really hard to do that. When we are on that path, on, let's say, a more traditional path to success, it is so hard to get off that path. You have a job, you are growing in that job, you are starting to become respected and listened to, and you have a nice salary. You have security of that job, 401k, health insurance, all of that, right? Those things, they draw you in. They keep you very much rooted to this lifestyle. And, it's hard. It's hard to leave that. That's why, it's still quite difficult transition for a lot of people. So for me, it actually, I thought about it for many years. I dreamt about it, but I never did anything with it because of that reason, because it's just really hard. And plus, being an immigrant, there's a lot of pressure on us to succeed in the most traditional way of the world. My family still sort of thinks I'm crazy by giving all of that away. But for me, the impetus was really my health, because my last year in corporate, I just started, first of all, I reached a point of burnout because I was working incredible, like crazy hours. I wasn't happy doing what I was doing. And at some point, I couldn't even understand anymore why I'm doing this. I hated going to the office. I hated the environment I was working in, but I was on this path. And so my body started giving me these signs like, hey, something needs to change. So that was my breaking point, honestly. It was my body. I started having back issues. I couldn't even sit down at my desk at the office anymore. I had to work standing up. Every time I would come to the office, I'd start having anxiety. It was like that. That's how bad it got. So for anyone listening, if you're starting to see the signs, don't let them go to that stage. See the signs before that, so that was the impetus for me. One day I just said, something has to change here. I can't continue like this, and that's what gave it away. And the other thing is that the more practical consideration is that at my job, my brand that I was in charge of, I was a brand manager. So I was in charge of a brand. I was in charge of a P&L, profit and loss, for the brand, which is a huge responsibility if it's several $1 million brand. And the brand wasn't doing so well for many years now, due to different reasons in the industry. But I sort of suffered for it. The team let me go. They gave me a severance package. And I said, you know what? This is my cue. This is my cue that I can do something different with it, because I could just easily, very easily just pick up the call. I worked in a huge corporation that was very well known. I could just easily pick up the phone and say, hey, what else, give me a next job for recruiters. But I didn't. I said, let me use this as an opportunity to jump off into the unknown and do what I've actually always wanted to do, which is travel journalism. So that was the story.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that and for sharing it so honestly. I think that so many of us see those signs in ourselves, and we're really taught as a culture to repress that or to not create the connection.
Yes.
And like you said, you've set out on this path, you've had your checklist, you have followed all the rules, you've played all the things just right, and you've gotten to where you thought you needed to be. And again, this feels like a story that I have heard from many women, that we really feel like that's the path that we're meant to do, and it feels like you're doing all the right things, and yet all of a sudden, like for me, I really had stomach issues, and I get migraines, and I would get just really tired, just very tired. It's like my body's like, not interested in playing this game, you're just going to sleep. And when I start to notice that, I'm like, oh wait, now I know to say, like, where am I out of alignment? Where am I pushing too hard? What's maybe not the thing that I should be doing right now? But before, I didn't know. I just kind of, like you, just like crashed. And in my trajectory, I ended up getting laid off from a position right after 9/11. And so like, it's those things where you're like, oh, it's just one more thing, just one more thing. And I've worked so hard and this and that. And like the instinct might be to be like, fight harder, right? Instead of saying like, wait, was I given space? I was like given a gift. Like I have to stop. My body's telling me to stop. And then we feel like, no, like, don't let the check boxes fall. And that panic mode will rebound right into something the same, or even with another level of disconnection from our real alignment.
Yeah, that's so well said. And I mean, I think it can be a topic of a conversation on its own, because we live in a society, and it's changing, by the way. I see, like, now in the past few years, it's been changing, but by and large, we live in a society where, this trajectory, if you will, that you're supposed to take, it's like the only thing that you can do, the only thing that will be considered successful in life. And that's just not true. There are so many different ways to be successful. And let's even, talk about what is success. It's so many different things to so many different people. But as I've been on this path, I've thought about it so much. Like, why is it so hard for us to get out of that thinking that, unless you're working in corporate and receiving a salary, you are not successful, or how hard it is for us to take those steps that veer outside of that norm. It took a real effort for me to shed that thinking, because I lived in that system for so many years. It was hard, but travel, by the way, is what helped me get out of it. Because what I did right after this happened, I booked a 6-month trip around the world. And I said, okay, let's jump right into this new lifestyle. Let's try to figure out how to be a travel journalist in those 6 months. But what was happening is that as I slowly moved through the world in those 6 months, I met people who were living differently than the corporate world that I left behind. And that helped me see, okay, so there is a different way to be in this world and to operate and to live. And that was really monumental. I came back to the States a very changed person. And then I could no longer see myself in corporate ever, and still can't. It's been 6 years now. I still can't imagine going back to that world where you're living, for the paycheck, for the mortgage, for the car, for the promotion. I don't know. I can't imagine that anymore.
Yeah, I think it definitely, I see that too, and relate to that. And there's something about, as you mentioned, when you travel, and I think you start to witness joy and you witness connection in a way that isn't valuable as often, as much in this, again, in this mindset, in this culture. It's so self-sacrificing and family sacrificing, like so many things. And you set off somewhere, and all of a sudden, you're someplace where maybe you're expecting to come in face to face with, for instance, poverty or desperation or isolation. And what you end up seeing is like simplicity and connection and joy. And you have these powerful moments. And like you said, you're so changed. It like awakens a part of us that has just been sleeping, in order to really kind of succumb to this other rhythm. And that's like, once you wake that beast, or I don't know, it's like better than a beast, I don't know the opposite, but like it's amazing. It really allows you to continue to say yes to the things that fill you up. And I know, like, especially the past 2 years, I've been like, well, maybe I'll just look for another job. Like maybe it's really time. And I start looking, and then they're like, and the hours are 9 to 5, and I can feel it in my chest right now. And I'm just like, no, 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 no. And not to say that that's wrong. It's just not right for me. And there's just something so valuable in being able to have that conversation with yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And that's like, I think we sort of keep saying the same thing, but travel, I mean, it just exposes you to different ways to live. And that's the most powerful thing that can happen to you, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult. Just imagining new ways of being and operating in this world is so powerful. And you have to go outside your doorstep to see that. So that's why travel is so powerful.
Yeah. Well, let's move into talking about that. So you had this vision, you really wanted to travel. And how did that evolve into writing and photography? And really, I think for you, storytelling and capturing these stories of people and place and communicating that with others, which, I mentioned, I really love the way that you're able to kind of evoke that connection. But how did you begin to see that as your path, and why do you think that's so important?
Yeah, so I had a dream for a long time. I've always loved traveling. I had my camera on me since I was 10 years old. I always wrote. I was a little girl writing stories. And I always had this side of me, the storytelling side, and I tried to express it in different ways. I had a blog at some point. I was writing fiction stories at some point too. But I just never imagined that this could be something viable or something that I could really devote my life to. But then when this whole situation with corporate happened and I took it as a sign, I jumped. I went on that 6-month trip around the world, and very naively, perhaps, I told myself, in these 6 months, you'll figure out how to be a travel photographer and writer, how to work with publications. You'll figure all of this out, no problem. And of course, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. First and foremost, because I was burnt out. And I didn't give myself any time, or I thought I didn't need any time to recover. And I did. Oh boy, like most of those 6 months I spent doing nothing and just recovering from the years of the corporate stress before that. So when I came back to the States, though, I was very lost. I was very discouraged. I didn't make any progress on my dream. And my friends and my peers kept getting promoted and advanced in their corporate careers. So I thought, goodness, I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But this is a story that I always tell in many different environments that I'm in, because I think it's just so powerful that one night I had a stroke of luck or something that told me, just sit down and write 10 things that Yulia will become by the end of this year. What do you want, Yulia? What do you want? Because we don't ask ourselves that question nearly enough. And answering that question means that you have to answer it in great detail, actually. You can't just say, well, I want to be a travel photographer and writer. Well, what does that mean? What does that actually mean? We have this sort of vague idea in our minds that, there's something that we want, but when we go down to the detail of it and we start imagining the details of it, oftentimes it's like, well, is that what I want? Or is there something else? There's no spaces in our lives where we do that kind of work for ourselves. And now that I do it a lot, it's just so interesting to me that we don't dedicate time and space to this, because this is probably the most important thing we can do for ourselves. This gives us direction. This gives us, vision. Where do you want to go with your life? Where do you want to be? It's so important, but we don't do that, So that's what I did. And that's sort of how my path unfolded, that I gave that direction to myself with those 10 things on that piece of paper. And I started simply working towards each one of them, figuring out if I wanted to work with Lonely Planet, for example, what does that mean? How do I work with Lonely Planet? Let's go to their website. Let's start engaging on their Instagram. Let's start seeing all kinds of possibilities. Let's maybe find somebody on LinkedIn who works at Lonely Planet. Let's send them a message, so all these things, but it gave me direction to move and to advance in these points one by one. When it comes to storytelling, which was sort of your other part of that question, I think that's something that, again, that was always in me. And I always felt that people are more alike than different. And we try to see people as different through various political, cultural situations. But at the end of the day, we're all the same. We want the same things, all of us, all of humanity wants the same things, And I just saw that so clearly when I traveled, and particularly when I traveled to the regions of the world that in the Western world, let's say, we're always stereotyped as the other, as the scary, That's why a lot of my work is rooted in the Middle East region, for example, because, I've, from the very first time I came to the Middle East, I just saw incredible people, incredibly kind, welcoming, and amazing people. I didn't see all those stereotyped headlines that were so prevalent in the States, and I don't know, that's really the fire that keeps me going in this industry. I feel very strongly about this. And so I try with all of my work, I try to advance that understanding that we are all the same. And we need to spend time with that other. We need to share tea. We need to share a meal and a conversation. And that's the quickest way of, removing those barriers and those walls that we build. That's why I started the travel company, because for me, it felt like I can write about Jordan or the region all day long. But sometimes the most powerful experience is the one that you experience yourself. So then I wanted to take it a step further and say, okay, let's start bringing people here and let's start showing them how amazing it is. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of what drives me.
Yeah, I love that. And that's very much my motivator too. I looked at, as I've traveled, like, what were the moments that stick with me? What are the moments that I can't let go of, that I relive over and over in my mind as the most powerful? And as you were talking about, breaking down these images and perceptions we have of cultures, especially in the Middle East, I had an experience traveling, and it was really, really powerful for me. I was younger at the time. I was traveling with a lot of seasoned industry professionals, and we were, like I said, we were in the Middle East, and some of the people were talking about, being a little bit nervous. How are we going to be perceived? How are we going to connect culturally? Again, this was not very long after 9/11, so there was still a lot of tension, and it was probably really amplified in that moment. But I was really surprised by these people that I just thought were like kind of beyond thinking about these things, that I just assumed they would just be comfortable wherever they went. So that was like a really powerful awareness. And then we had an afternoon where we were able to spend with this man who invited us to go to his mosque. And he asked if he could just share everything with us. And there was 3 women that were with him, which even in that felt like something that was breaking down a story in my mind, that he was spending that time with us. And then he took us and he said, may I show you how we prepare to enter? And he showed us like how they cleanse themselves to enter the mosque. And I was really almost in tears, because I felt like he's giving us a sacred gift. Like, this feels like such a privilege to be a part of this. And he's doing it with so much love. and just like pride, like I'd never experienced. And then he took us in, and this mosque was like the most deeply spiritual place I've ever experienced. Like I just could feel like the love of the people and the beauty of this building, and nothing about it was about religion or culture. It was just about this like human experience. And then he asked if he could read us his favorite passage from the Quran, and I was like, yes, like I'm in this experience. And he started reading, and again it was just like, it was so beautiful and authentic and vulnerable and honest. And like every time I now think of that region, this is the person I think of. And I was like, okay, this is travel. This is what travel needs to be. And if more people had the privilege of connecting with someone in this way, in my mind, this like erases all of these things we've created. And I just think, like you said, this is the mission. This is like, I feel like our shared purpose is to bring as many people into the spaces where they can have that kind of connection, and then come away from that like ambassadors of the places that they've been and of the people that they've met.
Yes, absolutely. So beautifully said. And I can almost see tears in your eyes now as you're talking about this. I can see how much it moved you, that experience. And I can relate to that so much because, yes. And then you come back to the States, and then, all the questions again. How are you traveling there alone? Is it safe? Isn't there war there? Like all those crazy, crazy things. But I think for me, the hope is that if not erase the stereotypes and walls, because that's also a very tall order for us. But I think at least pause the next time you're going to read those headlines. At least pause and think about it a little bit differently. And that's actually one of the first ever group I took to Jordan. Later on, one of the people, that's what they messaged me with, and they're like, Yulia, now that I'm reading the headlines coming out of the region, I can't jump right there, like into that headline right away. I'm like, but wait a minute, my experience there was completely different. And that's like the biggest praise from me, because that's exactly it. At least give it some space. Don't jump into that headline, because it's so easy, right? We all done this. We're scrolling through our feed, we're scanning those headlines, and it's just so easy to just intake those messages. So yeah, it's my hope that with my work, whether it's the travel company or whether it's the stories I'm doing, that people will be less inclined to jump into these headlines right away.
Yeah. And to be fair, when it's the culture that we're immersed in, that is the natural response. That's what we're shown. That's why it exists in many times, is to actually create that an immediate reaction. Like that's kind of a part of the process of storytelling from the other side of storytelling. Like it's such a powerful tool. That's why it's used. And so I really love that that you have seen the power of storytelling for connection. And I think, like you said, getting other people out there, getting people to just slow down, thinking twice, tapping into themselves. I think also when we have a better sense of who we are, we also respond differently. Like there's just something about the way that travel allows us to see ourselves as well. And, when you're having that experience and connecting, like, I was really learning about myself, like, oh, I didn't know I was so passionate about spirituality or architecture, or so amazing to start to witness yourself in a different way. And so I think that's another reason why really getting out there and traveling is so powerful too.
For sure. And something else I wanted to say, as you were sharing your experience, is that we're also ambassadors of wherever we come from, and that's also a powerful element of this, because actually it's not a one-sided phenomenon that there is let's say a stereotype in the States about the Middle East. Plenty of stereotypes in the Middle East about the States happen as well. And a lot of people there have very strong feelings about what the States is or isn't doing, and so that that whole exchange goes both ways. You know, when I come as someone who is based in the States, although hopefully not for much longer. I'm planning to move out of the States soon. But when I come as a person from that area, I am also hopefully doing some work in dismantling some of those stereotypes for them, you know, so it's important both ways for sure.
Yeah, I really often talk about being an ambassador of where you're from and a guest of where you are, and really creating that synergistic relationship that it really needs to be more well-rounded, like you said.
Love that.
Well, you've mentioned a little bit about Nomad and Jules. We haven't mentioned it by name, but you mentioned that you wanted to kind of build on this work that you're doing in storytelling and as a journalist and bring that into that company. Is there anything else that you want to share about why you created that, or how travelers, what that trip offers them in traveling with you?
Yeah, you said something about how we learned also something new about ourselves every time we travel. And so it's interesting because originally my motivation behind starting this was that I wanted to take it one step further, right? And not just tell stories about the region, but actually have people experience the region the way I experience it, and share the connections and the relationships that I've built there. I have just some incredible friends there now, you know. But in the process of doing that, what I learned about myself is that I am actually so happy when I lead these groups and I interact with these people. Somehow I tend to attract very like-minded, like-hearted people. Without fail, we become great friends and we see the world very similarly. And it's just it's such an honor and a joy for me to be leading those groups. And I love it dearly. You know, every single group I just absolutely love. So yeah, our next one is coming up in October. I still need to put it all together and plan it, but it's going to be in October, which is a nice time to be in Jordan. And I enjoy this side of my work very much, for sure.
It seems like a natural extension. Well, I do want to go back to Travel Media Lab and talk a little bit about that. So I feel like many of us in the space of travel, we ended up evolving and new things were kind of born out of this time where we were trying to figure out how we could continue to serve community and connect with others. And for you, this was the evolution of Travel Media Lab. So can you talk about what that is and who it's for?
Yes. Yeah, like exactly like you said, if it wasn't for COVID and the great slowdown of COVID, this wouldn't have happened because I was too busy traveling. I had no time to even venture into teaching or building community. But just before COVID started, I was already starting to think about teaching because people would approach me all the time on Instagram and ask me all these questions. And so I sort of had this inclination that I want to start sharing what I know. And then, of course, COVID happened and I had my first class, my first workshop in the summer of 2020, I believe. And again, what I discovered is that I absolutely enjoy that part of my job and that part of my work. And when I quit corporate and I started on this path, I told myself that all the projects I will do from now on absolutely must be projects that light up my fire. Like, it doesn't make sense for me to do something that I'm not like 100% passionate about or engaged in or believe in, and go through all the instabilities of being a freelancer, all the risk taking and all of that. You know, it just doesn't make sense. If you're going to do that, just go back to corporate and you have a nice sort of nice salary and all of that. So that's what's been guiding my work and everything I've been doing ever since. You know, all the projects I've done. Not all of them are in the travel space too, by the way. There's one project I was helping out with in New York where a friend of mine was helping people to figure out what their next step should be after corporate. And I absolutely loved that. I was just like, yes, how can I help? So I was leading a marketing effort for them, for example, and writing a newsletter and all of that. So that's how I guide that's what guides my work now. It's like, does this light you up? Do you believe in it? Do you want to work with these people and on this cause? Yes, let's do this, So with Travel Media Lab, that's sort of how the evolution happened. I just learned that all the women that were coming into the community, I just absolutely loved connecting with them, guiding them, sharing my knowledge with them. It happened by accident that it was all women. I didn't set out to help women specifically, but somehow my first few workshops, only women showed up. So we sort of continued. And in the process, I learned that we have so many issues that we all deal with, women specifically, namely imposter syndrome, namely not believing how incredible we are, not believing that what we have to say matters or that anyone will listen. And that extends beyond travel stories. That just extends to how we act in the world, how we operate, how we show up in the world, the chances we take or don't take. So funny enough, a lot of what we do inside Travel Media Lab is that boosting up of each other and reminding each other, hey, no, you are incredible. You should take that chance. You should go after that thing, Travel Media Lab has evolved. We used to be called Genius Women, I loved that name, but it also wasn't quite accurate to communicate that it's about travel media and the travel industry, Now we're sort of evolving. I still hold the focus on working with women and helping women overcome some of those issues that I talked about in the travel space. But I also, by the way, absolutely loved what Beth Santos, the CEO of Wonderful, said at the conference that you and I both just attended, that women's issues are human issues. And everyone should be at the table when talking about that. That resonated with me so much because I actually want more of our male allies in our community now, because yes, absolutely believe that. It's like, we don't want to be in a vacuum talking about this. We want to bring everybody in and talk about these issues together in the travel space and beyond, So that just resonated with me so much. So that's how sort of the mission of this platform is evolving, that it's helping storytellers break into and thrive in the travel media space. We do focus on women's issues, but we want everybody at the table talking about these things.
Yeah, that is, thank you for mentioning that. That is definitely something that I think has come out of the evolution of my podcast as well. And speaking with many women who are leaders in the industry, saying that, it's like, we kind of needed this space to have these conversations, kind of like get our thoughts organized, get our values and our trajectory organized. But now we're realizing that there's only so much women can do in elevating the voices of other women without having interaction across the board and having supporters that are saying, okay, yes, like we see the space needs to be created for conversations across all genders and all identities, and that this, as you said, like women's problems are human problems. I think this was really, brought to my attention as I've traveled as well, and seeing women in community and seeing communities where they had evolved to the point where women had started speaking with male leaders in communities, and seeing what had evolved out of that interaction and engagement. And so I love that you brought that into the conversation. And I agree. I think that feels like a lot of people I've talked to are like, that's the next step. And a lot of people are on the precipice of creating that space.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you said, that, we did need that safe space, let's say, in the beginning, right? We needed that space where we could share freely sort of how we feel and what obstacles we face. But yeah, the next step is absolutely, we have to involve everyone. Otherwise, not much is going to change. We can't just continue talking in vacuum in our bubbles. So yeah, I'm excited about this next phase of this. And by the way, something that we haven't really touched upon, which is something that I try to talk about all the time in conversations with people is this idea of, let's also not glamorize the all of this is really hard, like building your own business, building your own podcast, right? Being a freelancer, like let's talk, like it's hard work. You don't have the support of this huge system behind you that you did in corporate, where you had the budgets and you had a team perhaps to work with and a manager who tells you what to do. I'm sure you can relate to this. Like this is hard work. But also, and that's what gives me the energy and the passion to keep going day in and day out, is that I absolutely love this. Like every day I wake up and I can't wait to check my email. That was never the case in corporate. You know, I couldn't wait for the weekend in corporate. And now when I wake up in the morning, I can't wait to check my email because I can't wait to see what this new day brings with all the projects and everything that I'm working with. So this is that incredible, I guess trade-off is not the right word, but this is hard work. It's not always easy, and we have to make sure that we have support as well, but it's incredibly satisfying and incredibly rewarding path for anyone who is sort of ready to jump into it and start building.
Yeah, thank you for acknowledging that. I feel like that's something also that I've really been focusing on, and actually spent quite a lot of conversation in last weekend, like finally talking with people in person. It's as if I was meeting with my colleagues, right? We all have our own brands, businesses, things that we're doing, but that was our space to come together like as a team and work through some of these issues. And that was one of the things that came up, is that we're working so hard and we're so passionate and we're building these things. And what we realized is that sometimes we're building this really shiny exterior, and that's all people see. And they see like the successes and they see this trajectory, but they don't see like the duct tape and the fallen down scaffolding and the like how I'm propping this up over here. And I think I've got this covered, and nobody like looked behind that wall. And I think that's probably another part of this process, is really trying to figure out, and I was actually really thinking about this morning as I was driving, how do we show, like, can you project success and be authentic about where you're at and where you're struggling? Because if you are a one woman, one person business, like you can build Instagram and a website and like this facade, and some of it's true, like yes, there is successes, but we're also not really being super authentic about who's supporting us, like the parts where we really are struggling and where we need help and support, because we feel like if we let down that, you know, that mask, somebody will see that we don't have it all together, and then everything we've built will fall apart. And I feel like that is another space for, I don't know how to unpack that, but I think it's a reality for so many people. I mean, it's not all bylines in National Geographic, right? It's so much that goes into creating these dream lives and these things that are aligned with our passion.
Yes. And I mean, I had to mute myself because my dog decided to say something too, but I was getting goosebumps as you were talking, because that's exactly it, you know. And I think it starts with having conversations like these and being really open and vulnerable. And it is so hard for us to acknowledge this side and to ask for help. And exactly like you said, we feel like if we ask for help, that means we've failed somehow. It's not true, right? Asking for help is an incredibly powerful move, actually. And we need to start being better at it. I'm not so good at it too. I've also been raised and trained in this environment of you have to do everything on your own, otherwise you're a failure, basically. You know, what a mindset to operate with. So yeah, I think starting with conversations like this, and even being more vulnerable on social media or whatever other communications you have, and talking about all of the sides of it, not just the shiny side, that because we all want tend to want to share the shiny side, right? That's natural. It's natural behavior on social media. We all want to share the shiny side, but I think sharing all of it as well is so important.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, this has been such a brilliant conversation. I feel like the time is flying by. For people listening, I really encourage you to check out Travel Media Lab if you're interested in travel writing, and also your podcast, which we didn't get to, which is an extension of that. So I'll have a link in the show notes. It's so great if this is what you're wanting to learn about, but I also find that conversations much like ours are also happening. And so it's just really inspirational if you are really, looking at living your dream, and if you are really just wanting to learn more about this way of living and being, and learn from other women who have navigated this path. And I am so excited about our connection. I just wanted to mention there was one woman who I kept running into last weekend who was at several of your events, and we kind of chatted, and she was like, oh, I'm not missing her next session. I'm like, you don't miss it, because like there's so much that she's willing to share for others to be able to walk down this path. And I think that's one of my favorite things that I've learned about you through our interactions. And I really want to show up that way too, is like, we might have learned all of this and, reach wherever we're at. But we also don't want to be standing there alone. We're like, you can do this too. Like, you can do this too.
yes.
And I think it's such an amazing energy. And I think that's another one that we're getting used to, is this thing that the only way we just achieve success is if we're at the top of the pyramid. And I just don't think that is the paradigm that we're trying to create either.
Oh, I love that you said that, Christine. It's so powerful. And literally last night I was thinking about this, because I was recording actually a recap, like a wrap-up episode for my podcast that's coming out soon. And that's what I said at the end there, that when you step into the light, when you share, when you are actually not afraid to be visible, because that's actually another side that we didn't even touch on, but that's very common through a lot of the work I'm doing in Travel Media Lab, is that women are afraid to be visible too. You're not only going after your own dreams and building your own dream life, whatever that is, but you're also showing other women how that is possible. And I think that's part of what ignites me so much now, is that whenever I share my story, whenever I have these conversations, this is what I'm doing, right? I'm showing other women, hey, look, you can do this. Come join me. Let's do it together. And let's not be at the top of the pyramid. Let's be in a circle together. That's much fun.
Oh my gosh, so good. I feel like you said, we probably could spend hours going other directions, because I think, not only are we aligned in storytelling and connection and purpose and passion, but also this really creating spaces for women and creating this leveling up and this unified raising. So I'm so honored to get to share this with you. Before we end, I have 7 rapid fire questions that we get to play with, but just really encourage listeners to visit your website, check out Travel Media Lab and Travel Media Lab podcast. I know you'll find something hidden in there that is the message you're looking for. So the first question is, what is your favorite book or movie that offers you a travel escape or inspires adventure?
Oh, so many, but immediately what came to the top was Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. It's a story about the devil coming to 1930s Russia, right after it went through the whole communist takeover of the country and wreaking havoc there. It's also a love story. It also takes place in Jerusalem, of other places, and it's just an incredible book. Recommended to everyone always. Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov.
Thank you. I'm a total book nerd, book junkie, book appreciator, whatever. I have so many books, and I ask that question selfishly, really, because I'm always looking for like the next thing, and that sounds so amazing. What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel?
My camera. for sure. My headphones. My hack for long transatlantic flights is podcasts. I love podcasts, and on the flight, I go through so many of them. I catch up to all the ones that I haven't been able to listen to in regular life. So yeah, my headphones are always there.
I just actually on the way to WITS finally got like some Bluetooth headphones because my old plug-in ones don't work with any of my new technology, I realized. And then I didn't have any of the right apps except for podcasts. So I listened to podcasts on the plane and I was like, oh no, like here we go. I can feel myself like binging podcasts. Normally I try to listen to a book on tape or watch a movie or something, but it was so amazing to like be like, oh, I just got 4 hours of valuable content in.
And from the wellness standpoint, I just love how I don't have to strain my eyes. I can just close my eyes, just relax, and still do something amazing for my mind. So I love that.
Yeah. Let's see, what has been one of the most memorable or impactful destinations you've visited?
Goodness, so many. But first thing that came to mind was Mongolia. It was really a very wild terrain. It felt like it was at the end of the world. It was so hard to get to Mongolia. It took so many hours. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful landscape and people. And it's also changing quite fast. It's in flux. A lot of the traditional lifestyle there is changing. And if anyone has been thinking about going to Mongolia, now is the time to go, because in the next few years, the country will be very different than what it is today. So yeah, check out Mongolia for sure.
That feels like a whole other conversation, but I'll put a pin in that one. Where do you still long to visit?
You know, it's a funny question because I just had this conversation with someone. Sorry, these are not rapid fire.
It's
I'm like
okay.
giving you these huge answers.
Rapid fire-ish. I'm going to rename them.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So like I've only visited 60 some countries and there's still so many that I haven't seen. But lately I've been realizing that I tend to want to return to places I've already been to because there's people there I love and I want to see those people. So before, when I was younger, I just, let's go. The next one. What's the next? Now it's like, I want to see the people I love who are in the places that I've been to. So I don't know. It's a tough one.
I love seeing that in people. That has also been a reoccurring theme, that it's sometimes hard not to want to go back to the places that mean a lot to you. And if you take that time for that soulful connection, like, well, I really want more of that. I'm a little nervous about going somewhere else and forging new connections. Not that you couldn't do it, but you're like, I just really want to treasure the ones that already exist.
For sure.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place you've been?
Knafe. Knafe is a Palestinian dessert. You can find it all throughout the Middle East region. The best one is Amman. In Amman is in a place called Habiba Sweets in downtown Amman. It's a little tiny, like a little hole in the wall place, but there's always like this huge line that extends, throughout the street there. And they've been there forever and they have the best knafe. It's this cheese and rose water and kutaif pastry dessert that's just absolutely incredible. I love eating it. You can find it here in the States as well, by the way. But yeah, kunafe is called.
Who was the person that inspired or encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
Who was the person? Goodness. I don't know. I think just by the way I was raised, just moving between Estonia and Kazakhstan all the time. It was just so natural. So I guess my family, I would say my mom, my grandma, who always moved around as well. But it was very natural to me to do that from an early age.
And the last is, if you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Goodness, who would I want to go travel with? That's oh my goodness, that is a great question. Fellow photographers, I've been surprised at how amazing it is to go. I have two photographer friends. We recently went to Egypt together, and it was one of the most amazing trips I had. We were so aligned with what it is that we wanted to get out of the trip, the way we moved, through the places, the way we interacted with people, it was just such magic. Yeah, I want more of that. So traveling with fellow photographers, it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for this conversation. It's really just like the exact reason why I started doing this in the first place. It's so nourishing, and I really, really treasure the time that we've gotten to spend together today.
Me too, Christine. Me too. Thank you so much. Very thoughtful questions, beautiful reflections on everything. And I feel like we need to continue the conversation going because it's been really nourishing for me as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.